I never imagined I'd one day have the courage to speak out and tell my story, not because I wanted to protect myself, but because I was afraid to look at who I had become. For a long time, what I carried inside was too heavy to tell and too dark to face. My name is Daniel, and before you try to imagine who I was, I need to say with all the honesty that exists within me today, I wasn't a man who lost control. I was someone who surrendered control to evil itself and enjoyed it. I became what people whisper about, afraid of attracting fate to their own homes. I was an international drug trafficker, laundering millions while destroying lives, families, futures, and destinies that didn't belong to me. I didn't start in crime with the ambition of becoming a monster. I just wanted to feel alive. Evil never knocks on the door saying who it really is. It presents itself as opportunity, a shortcut, a way out, rights, merit. When I received the first suitcase full of money, my whole body trembled, not from fear but from pleasure. It was as if that amount was a code that released within me a feeling of importance I never knew I had. I justified it by saying that no one was obligated to consume anything I sold, that each person had the free will to choose their own path. While repeating that phrase, I erased the truth. I profited from the pain of others. With each border I crossed, something inside me died. When a plane took off with the merchandise, I felt my humanity remain on the ground, curled up like a wounded animal, trying to cry for help inside a body that no longer obeyed its conscience. I slept surrounded by luxury, but woke up with the weight of an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. I said I was the master of my destiny, when in reality I was already completely dominated by it, and it was precisely when I became convinced that no one could stop me, that the inevitable began to happen, because fate demands its due. And when it does, it demands interest. My downfall was imminent, and you will witness the moment when crime led me to my death. I know this testimony has already moved you and sparked questions you may never have asked before. Stay tuned. What will be revealed may challenge everything you believe about life, death, and eternity. If you want to follow the next testimonies, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps this message reach those who need to hear it before time runs out. When the money started, pouring in amounts I never imagined possible, something inside me transformed so intensely that, looking back now, I realized that's when my humanity began to dissolve. What was once just a risky business became my identity. I was no longer the Daniel who grew up in a humble neighborhood trying to survive. I became the man who solved problems. The world of international drug trafficking isn't like in the movies, where everything is chaotic and improvised. It's a calculated, professional, silent, almost corporate system. I dealt with nightclub owners, fake importers, and even high-ranking people who could never appear in public, but who would call me personally to ensure the merchandise reached its correct destination. I had connections in airports, ports, and border crossings you wouldn't even imagine exist, and all of this made me feel like I was on top of the world. I would enter luxury hotels where no one asked my name, because money spoke before me. I walked through the corridors of private airports as if they were extensions of my living room. The cars I drove had such dark windows that I couldn't even see my own reflection. With each new country, each new deal, I felt I was ingesting a dose of power that intoxicated me in an almost spiritual way. It was as if I shone on the outside while rotting on the inside. I could buy anything, conquer anyone, manipulate any mind, and the more I was treated as someone important, the more I forgot that I was just a man. I remember one particular night in Dubai when I was on a rooftop so high that I could see the entire city lit up as if it were an inverted sky. I was holding a glass of champagne and laughing with people who seemed to own the world, but who were as empty as I was. Someone told me, "You were born for this. You have no limits." That phrase pierced my chest like a sweet poison. For the first time, I truly believed I was above any judgment, above the law, and above all, above God. I looked down. From that absurd height and thought, "No rule can reach me here." I didn't realize that that thought wasn't pride, it was condemnation, The more I grew in crime, the more I diminished as a human being. The faces of the people I destroyed ceased to have meaning because I was at a level where the pain of others becomes just a statistic. I convinced myself that I wasn't harming anyone because I didn't see the suffering up close. I didn't see mothers crying. I didn't see young people falling apart. I only saw the profit. Money in that quantity has a power that no one admits. It silences the conscience. When the heart tries to speak, the sound of money is louder. And each time I climbed another step on that ladder of power, I didn't know that I was actually descending to the darkest place a man can go. Because crime is never the top. Crime is the beginning of the abyss, and this descent has a precise moment when the soul surrenders. Do you want to discover what mine was? Comment. I want to. Know what the first darkness was. The first time I crossed a border carrying drugs wasn't like in the movies where everything happens on impulse. Before that moment, I spent weeks negotiating with people I didn't yet know were allies or enemies, practicing answers to every possible question from federal agents, memorizing routes and false names, as if I were rehearsing for a play whose stage was the whole world. Deep down, I knew that this trip wasn't just a business opportunity. It was as if my soul was standing before a door that could never be reopened after I crossed it. And even feeling this, I walked towards it with the arrogance of someone who doesn't fear the consequences. I remember sitting on a plane, holding a fake passport with my name altered. My hands were sweating, not from regret but from excitement. Fear was mixed with adrenaline, and for the first time, I understood why some people become addicted to risk. There's a pleasure in challenging limits, especially when we believe that nothing and no one can stop us. I looked out the window and convinced myself that this moment would change my life forever. And it did. But in a way I only understood when I was already bound to my spiritual destiny. When I landed, I walked to the baggage carousel with the feeling that every breath could betray my guilt. It was as if every glance around me could read what I carried inside. However, when I picked up my suitcase and passed through security without any agent, raising suspicion, I felt something terrible and addictive. I felt power. It was as if hell had placed the first drop of poison inside me. The guilt vanished, the fear evaporated, and in that instant, the door opened completely. I remember the sound of the suitcase rolling on the cold airport floor, and inside me, the echoing sound was different. The sound of my conscience silencing itself for the first time. I thought, if it happened once, it will always happen. That seemingly harmless phrase imprisoned me. From that moment on, I ceased to be someone who occasionally committed crimes and became someone whose identity was crime. The first crossing didn't just bring me money, it brought me the illusion that I was in control of my destiny, when in reality I was being led to a place where return was no longer possible. Sin didn't begin when I carried tons of weight. It began when I carried the first gram. It wasn't the volume that opened the door. It was the decision, because no. Fall begins in the abyss. Every fall begins with the first step outside of consciousness, and that step was only the beginning. But what comes after that door is even more terrifying, when evil ceases to shock and becomes routine. After the first crossing, the guilt began to slowly dissolve, like ice melting without us noticing. I no longer felt that weight in my stomach or the cold sweat on my hands when negotiating. It was as if my heart had developed a kind of emotional shield that allowed me to witness evil without truly seeing it. The money anesthetized me, and the more I earned, the further I became from my own conscience. The routine transformed into a solid chain of clandestine trips, secret meetings, and decisions involving lives. But the deeper I sank into that universe, the more my soul seemed to lose the ability to recognize that those lives actually existed. The empathy that once still whispered within me became a distant echo and slowly disappeared. There was one moment that marked me, when one of the buyers called me in despair because a batch of the cargo had caused several young people to overdose at a festival. I remember listening to the account with the same coldness as someone listening to a weather forecast. While he talked about sirens, ambulances, and bodies being carried away, I only analyzed numbers, values, losses, replacements. I didn't imagine faces. I didn't visualize families. I didn't see mothers receiving the news that their son wouldn't be. coming home. I responded with phrases that I now realize were from a man spiritually dead inside, something like, "Losses happen. We continue with the operation," as if I were talking about broken boxes or expired products in a warehouse. The real horror was happening on the other end of the line, while I remained seated in a 5-star hotel, drinking imported whiskey, believing I had control over everything. The values I once claimed to hold had vanished without me realizing the exact moment. They ceased to exist. I began treating human beings as if they were disposable statistics, as if their suffering were necessary collateral damage to sustain my lifestyle. Indifference doesn't arise as a scream. It appears as a silence that settles within the chest until you no longer recognize that you once possessed a heart. Because when you lose the ability to care, you lose your humanity. The peak of my coldness occurred one night when one of my delivery drivers was shot and killed during a delivery. The phone rang and the man on the other end informed me that the package hadn't arrived. I asked about the value of the loss, mentally calculated it, and replied, "Send another one." I didn't ask his name, age, if he had family, or who would mourn him. I didn't want to know if there was a wife waiting, if there were children asking why their father wasn't coming back. That night, while a man's body likely lay somewhere dark, I was laughing with strangers on a rooftop illuminated by artificial lights that masked the darkness within me. I wasn't aware that when the heart stops feeling, the soul begins to die. And it was precisely when I lost the ability to feel that something happened, something so quick and definitive that it ripped away the false control I believed I possessed. Because when the heart no longer listens, the body needs to be silenced. The night everything fell apart seemed at first glance just another one among many, and I remember every detail with an almost cruel clarity, as if the scene were frozen in my memory to eternally remind me of the price one pays when the soul ignores all the signs God sends. I had been called to a major negotiation, one of those that fed our vanity, believing we were on another level of crime, a level where no risk could truly touch us. The meeting would take place in a warehouse near the port, and that place smelled of oil, rust, and the sea, a mixture that always clung to the air as a warning, but which to me sounded like a promise of profit. I parked my car certain that I was about to close one of the biggest deals of my life, accompanied by 3 men I trusted blindly, because in the world of crime we believe loyalty can be bought, when in reality it only lasts as long as the interest remains. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was too quiet for a transaction of that magnitude, and I should have realized that silence is also a kind of trap. The fluorescent lights flickered as if they were sick, casting long shadows across the wall. I walked around looking at everything, with the false sense that I had absolute control over every detail around me. The suitcase with the money was with me, and at some point in my ridiculous arrogance, I came to believe that that weight made me untouchable. When the men who would handle the negotiation emerged from behind some stacked boxes, everything seemed to be going according to plan, but there was a discomfort I couldn't name, an unease I ignored in the same way I ignored the voice of my conscience. I started talking about the route and the delivery until I noticed a strange movement in the corner of my field of vision. One of the men accompanying me, someone who had been by my side for years, subtly slid his hand inside his jacket, as if taking out a phone to check a message. Except it wasn't a phone. The moment he pulled out his gun was so seemingly slow that I had time to see not only the gesture, but also the expression of someone who had made a definitive decision. His eyes conveyed neither hatred nor regret, only coldness. Before I could react or try to understand, I heard the shot echoing through the warehouse with a force that pierced the air and my body at the same time. I felt the impact as if a wall had slammed into my chest. I tried to say something, maybe ask for help, maybe question the reason, but my words found no way out. The ground began to approach as if the world were crumbling in slow motion, and as I fell, I realized that all the certainties I carried with me were useless in the face of death. The cold of the concrete touched my body before the pain fully arrived, and the sound around me began to fade, as if someone were turning down the volume of the world. I thought that was the end. But death wasn't the end, Death was the beginning of the scariest part, because when the heart stops, consciousness continues. The first thing I felt after the impact wasn't pain, but a silence so profound it seemed to swallow everything around me, as if the world had suddenly been submerged in thick water, where sounds arrive distorted and breath is lost before it even leaves. I was lying on the cold floor of the shed, but it felt like my body was very far from me, as if I were just a spectator watching something that no longer belonged to me. I heard hurried footsteps, people running, muffled shouts that tried to sound like orders, but I couldn't distinguish words, only vibrations. It was as if I were trapped between two worlds, unable to understand which one I truly belonged to. I tried to open my eyes, and when I did, I saw my own body stretched out on the floor. The sight hit me with such paralyzing astonishment that I needed a few seconds to accept that it wasn't a hallucination. I was standing, but I was also lying down, as if two versions of me were coexisting and neither of them had control over absolutely anything. I reached out to touch my own shoulder, and my hand passed through it as if it were made of smoke. The sensation was so surreal that an intense panic spread through my chest. Not the panic of someone about to die, but the panic of someone who realizes they are already dead. The scene before me was almost cinematic. One of the men was trying to check my pulse, others were arguing, and all that movement was happening as if it were a parallel reality from which I no longer belonged. I tried to scream, to call someone by name, to ask for help, to demand that someone see me. But there was no voice, no sound, no language. The only thing that remained was the terrible awareness that I continued to exist, but no longer belonged to the physical world. At that moment, time lost its meaning. I don't know if seconds or hours passed. I only know that something began to pull me, as if an invisible force were tearing me away from everything I knew. And with every inch I moved away from my body, the feeling grew stronger that nothing I valued mattered. Money, cars, power, contacts, all the things I believed defined who I was turned to ashes in my mind. I realized painfully that I had spent years building a life for a body, but had never invested anything in my soul. And when the soul awakens, the body can no longer do anything. Do you really believe you're alive just because you're breathing? Comment: am I alive inside? As I was being pulled out of that shed, I felt as if I were passing through an invisible tunnel where gravity, time, or any physical sensation describable by human senses did not exist. The darkness surrounding me was not merely an absence of light. It was as if formed by everything I had ignored throughout my life. My sins, my choices, my justifications, my lies. The further I advanced, the more I realized I wasn't going somewhere but being led towards a truth. Then, without warning, an intense light appeared before me. It wasn't a light that hurt the eyes. It was a light that pierced through, revealed, and exposed. I tried to look at it, and the instant I did, everything I had hidden for years became visible. The approaching presence was not announced by any sound. There was no thundering voice, nor choirs of angels singing. There was only an absolute certainty that took hold of me. It was him. There was no mistaking him, because before him there is no need for explanation, no doubt, no resistance. The light seemed to breathe, and from within it emerged a figure that needed no introduction. I did not see him with the eyes of my body. I recognized him with my soul. His eyes did not judge me with words, but with truth. They did not accuse, they only showed. In a second, I knew I was before Jesus. I thought he would speak about my crimes, that he would cast me away in indignation, but he simply looked at me with such profound authority that I couldn't hold that gaze. In the reflection of his eyes, I saw every life I had destroyed. I saw mothers weeping before closed coffins. I saw young people full of future, consumed by addiction. I saw families falling apart. I didn't need him to condemn me, because at that moment I condemned myself. He didn't need to raise his voice, because truth is a judgment that demands no sound. His presence didn't crush my body, it crushed my pride. I tried to speak, I tried to justify myself, I tried to say that I wasn't to blame for what each person did with what I sold, But before I could articulate any excuse, he said something that completely pierced my being. "Did you know?" Those two words shattered all the defenses I had built up over the years. I always knew. It was never ignorance, it was a choice. Then he stretched out his hand, and the light around us changed. He was going to show me something. If Jesus looked into your soul right now, what would he see? Comment below. Jesus revealed the truth to me. When Jesus reached out his hand, the light around me changed, transforming into something I couldn't tell if it was a vision or a memory, but which had weight, smell, and real pain. It wasn't an exaggerated revelation, with fire or monstrous creatures, because hell doesn't need spectacle to exist. It sustains itself on the awareness of what we could have been and refused to be. First, he took me to a dark place, but it wasn't physical darkness. It was a complete absence of presence, as if God were definitively distant. There was no time, no sound, no direction, and the most devastating sensation was realizing that no one there pronounced God's name, because he was no longer sought there nor even remembered. Jesus didn't need to tell me that that place existed because of my choices. The simple absence of his presence was enough for me to understand the concept of torment. Then, like someone turning the pages of a book I myself wrote, he began to show me faces. I saw mothers kneeling in destroyed bathrooms after finding their children unconscious. I saw parents banging on hospital doors in despair because there was nothing more that could be done. I saw teenagers seeking escape and finding death. I saw broken families who never again shared a complete dinner. I didn't just see the scene, I felt every emotion, as if each tear that fell weighed heavily on me. The torment wasn't physical, it was emotional. I realized painfully that hell is having eternal awareness of the evil we have done, with no possibility of return, no second chapter, no alternative ending. My destiny was not determined by the amount of sin, but by the absence of repentance. Then Jesus said something that pierced my soul like a final sentence. "You weren't selling drugs. You were selling destiny." I tried to scream, to beg for a second chance, to promise I would change. But in that spiritual environment, time doesn't go backward and belated regret doesn't save. What if it were you? As I tried to argue before Jesus, attempting to promise a change I didn't even know was real, I felt something powerful happening far from that. Spiritual environment. At first it was like a distant, almost imperceptible sound, like a whisper crossing an endless corridor. Gradually the sound took shape, until it transformed into words I instantly recognized, not by the voice, but by the emotional intensity they carried. It was my mother's voice. A prayer pierced that dark place with the force of someone who had already cried every possible tear, but who chose to continue interceding for my soul even when I deserved nothing but the judgment I was about to receive. She said with a faith that cut through the spiritual silence, "God, don't let my son be taken by Satan. Take him out of this valley. Give him a chance to see who you are." When that cry reached me, something changed in the atmosphere. It wasn't Jesus who changed, it was me. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to justify myself. I didn't try to negotiate. I didn't try to hide my sin behind pride. I simply wept, not with physical tears, but with my soul. Because at that moment I understood that repentance is not remorse. Repentance is recognizing that there is no life apart from God's grace. It was as if a crack had opened in that place, and through it, the light returned to touch my existence. Jesus didn't say a word. He simply looked at me with a mixture of truth and mercy, as if saying without sound, "I heard your prayer even before you existed." When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, with tubes connected to my body and police officers at the door. The first word that came out of my mouth was a prayer. When I left that hospital, still weak and with my body scarred by the violence I myself had chosen to inflict, I was forced to confront a truth that would haunt me for the rest of my days. It wasn't the bullet that almost killed me. It was the life I chose to live. I had spent years believing that power was freedom, that control was security, that money was identity, and that the world should obey me because I was cunning enough to manipulate any situation. However, none of those thrones I had built withstood the blow of death. Death stripped away everything that was false, and only the truth remained. I discovered that, in the end, we don't take our titles, we don't take our achievements, we don't take our pride. We only take what we have built within our souls, and mine was empty. I understood something that changed my existence. It is not God who condemns us, it is we who choose to live far from Him. God doesn't close doors. We are the ones who lock the doorknob from the inside and keep the key in our pocket, pretending we don't know where it is. There is a war that no one sees, and this war is not outside. It happens in the silence of the heart, when we decide whether He will be our Savior or just a distant idea that we ignore until the last second. I came back to warn you that it's not worth waiting until the last second. Eternity is too long to be decided in a moment of pride. If this message touched you, don't ignore the voice speaking within. Subscribe to the channel and continue walking with me. Here, each video is an opportunity for God to speak to you again, because as long as there is life, there is still a chance for transformation.